Thank you so much for joining us today for our panel, Keys to Your Job Search in Uncertain Times. We're really excited to be hearing from our alumni guests and to be able to spend some time thinking about this topic during this crazy COVID-19 pandemic era. So we really appreciate you coming to join us, and we appreciate all the students who are coming on the call as well. So to start off, the thing we would like to do is just have you introduce yourself. Our panelists tell us what you studied and a little bit about the work you do now. And then students, I will let you know before we launch into that piece that there is a Q&A function. So you should see that down at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to type in questions as we're going throughout the panel, and we'll be able to answer those questions for you. We'll save some time for questions at the end. So for our first question with your introductions, we'll just go in alphabetical order. So Dana, if you'd like to start, and we'll just do alphabetical order by first name.
Could help if I unmuted myself. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dana Todd, and I graduated 1,000,000 years ago in 1991. I majored in advertising, and at the time, I graduated into a recession, so I kind of feel your pain. And now on my third recession, so I'm getting really good at this now, I feel like. What I'm doing now, fast forward, is that I have an online platform for fashion called Balladana, and it's all 100% made to measure women's clothing. So we work with 12 designers in 10 countries to create clothing exactly for your body measurements and to your customization. Whitney, you're muted.
I can jump in.
Oh.
I am Leah King, although I typically go by Leah. I graduated with a degree in public relations in 2006, and very soon after that entered into our lovely economic crisis of 2008. So I look forward to sharing a little bit more about the career path that I took. Today, I sit in Greenville, South Carolina, and I run a nonprofit called Build Carolina. We are focused on technology education, specifically helping people learn to code. I've got a couple of different programs under that umbrella, and I'm just glad to be here. So nice to meet you all. I will tag Juanita.
Unmuting. I'm Juanita, cousin Strauber. I graduated in 2008, also in the middle of a recession, the Great Recession. I studied newspaper journalism and international affairs and was heavily involved with the Red and Black. Today, I am communications director at a private school that's K through 12 in Midtown Nashville, Tennessee. And that work includes a lot of social media, website development, writing, advertising, media relations, creating print and electronic publications like magazines and annual reports, and a lot of crisis communications, which I did not expect going to a school. So in between PR in the newsroom, I got my MBA from Belmont University, which is also in Nashville, and have a concentration in entrepreneurship as well as negotiation.
Yes, I'm next. My name is Selwyn Crawford, and if Dana graduated 1,000,000 years ago, I graduated 2,000,000 years ago because I came out in 1981. And I was a newspaper concentration and actually graduated and went into work for newspapers and did that for a very long time until about a couple of years ago when they decided I should do something else, and maybe we'll talk about that later on. Now I am a editor, senior writer for HKS Inc., one of the nation's largest architecture firms. We do a lot of things all over the globe, really, from the Taj Mahal, really the Taj Mahal. We've done some renovation work there, to a lot of the stadiums that you see around the country, including the most expensive stadium in the world now, which will be SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, where the Rams and the Chargers will play. But we do a lot of stuff, and not just in sports stuff, but all over. So I kind of edit copy for our website and for external publications, and kind of guide our little writing team. And that's what I'm doing now. So that's me.
Thank you very much. I'll be moderating our panel today. My name is Whitney Denny, and I'm a career consultant at the University of Georgia Career Center, and I work with Grady students. So after this panel, if you have other questions, or if you feel like you want to work one-on-one with someone to answer some of those, you can definitely contact me, and we can talk about all of that together. So moving on to our next question for our panelists, what we want to know is, can you briefly walk us through your career journey? What were your goals when you were a UGA student, and how did you get from that to where you are currently in your current role?
I thought we'd go backwards. That means Selwyn first.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dana. I appreciate that. That's fine. Yeah, real briefly, I mean, coming out of school, back when I came out of college, the idea was that you get a job in newspapers and you could work it for 20, 30 years and retire and everything would be great. And I pursued that path. I went into newspapers. I started off in Orlando, which was a pretty good market to be in, actually. And I worked there for 7 years. And then the Dallas Morning News called and wanted to bring me out to Dallas. I love the Cowboys. I wanted to come out, be in Texas. I'm like, this is great. They hired me, and my career kind of progressed. I got to do some exciting things. They covered some Olympics, some big time riots, some other stuff that went on. It was great, and that worked really well. And so for my goal was proceeding very nicely up until 2 years ago in 2018, when newspapers, as you know, are struggling. They lost some revenue. They laid me off, and so then I had to obviously figure something else out. I wasn't quite ready for retirement, wasn't quite ready to not work. I had to figure something out. I started looking around for things that would be able to use the skills that I had, which writing, editing, those types of things, and putting them together. I never would have dreamed, seriously, never would have dreamed that an architecture firm would have that at all. And when I saw the advertisement for it, the job ad for it on LinkedIn, actually, which I never really used, although I've been a part of LinkedIn for years. I couldn't believe it. I read it 3 times because I kept saying, it must gonna say something about having to be an architect or having drawn something. It never did. And when I talked to them, they said, like, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who do what you do. I'm like, that's great. And that's kind of how I wound up. That's kind of the short version of it, but that's how I wound up there. It's been a great move.
Story is
Juanita?
pretty similar
Yeah,
to
that's
Mr.
Juanita, right.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar story. I was extremely ambitious when I was at Grady College and in SPIA. I planned to be a foreign correspondent, so I studied 2 languages at UGA, Arabic and German, and had several internships at different newspapers, attended so many conferences on journalism. And when I graduated, I had 2 internships lined up. So one was with the New York Times and one was with the Associated Press. I did some finagling, so I was able to push back the AP internship and did the Institute with New York Times in New Orleans, and then did some traveling. I spent a month in South Africa with UGA as far as the part of the study abroad program. And then I went to the Associated Press and started a little bit later than all the other interns. And it was known that like the top interns would get a job offer. And so I just knew that I was going to get a job with AP. So I started in the Atlanta Bureau. And after 3 months, they said, well, we don't have any jobs right now, but we do have a temp position open in Nashville if you're willing to fill in for someone who's on maternity leave. So I did a lot of general assignment work and then found my niche in consumer business reporting, which was great because there was a recession. There was always something to write about. I was on the cover of newspapers across the world and my copy was cited in broadcast. Like, I really felt like I was it, and that I made it. But after a year, that temp position came to a close, and I just started looking for jobs at newspapers. I went to the Commercial Appeal in Memphis for a short time, and then came back to Nashville to work at the Tennessee. And it was pretty tough because as much as I love telling people stories, I felt like the newsroom was a very toxic environment. It wasn't the same experience that I had in my various internships before, and including working for AP. It was very difficult for me to go from being on A1 every other day to then being like buried inside and like really fighting to have myself even on B1 in my work. So I just started looking for other opportunities that included writing. I wanted to keep being a storyteller. And so I went to work at Belmont University in their communications office, and then later for Metro government, filling in a communications role that works with the Housing and Development Agency here in Nashville. So if you told me 12, 13 years ago that I would be working at a school, I would have just laughed at you, because I have educators in my family and never wanted to be a teacher or anything like that. But where I am now is like the perfect fit for me, because I do a lot of writing, and I'm the lead on a lot of creative projects, but I have incredible flexibility that I didn't have when I was a reporter. So first few years out of college, I worked every Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, like you name the holiday. Because I was the youngest reporter, I was usually the one who was on duty. And now I have like 2 months of vacation a year, so much that I can't even use it. And it's just great for work-life balance. So that's my story.
You make it sound so awesome, Juanita. You're luring me into academia. My mom's an educator too, and I always swore, no, I will never work for a university. My path was a little bit different. I had a lot of jobs, and I guess I ended up being an entrepreneur almost from the very beginning without really ever trying or realizing it. A lot of it was just having to be reactive and also wanting to kind of control my own destiny. When I graduated at the end of '91, there were no jobs, and we didn't have the awesome resources that you have now at the university to put us into internships and things. So I was just thrown out there with nothing. So I ended up finding what I thought was a job that took me all the way across the country to California, to San Diego. But as it turned out, after working for free for 3 months, that the funding for the whole project fell apart, and I was stranded in San Diego and just had to hustle. So again, I took a job that paid nothing. It was on commission only, working for an ad agency and sales. So as I had never really done art sales before, but I liked being an account executive, and I enjoyed being part of the creative team there. So it took me 4 months to get my first sale and my first little paycheck. But then I caught my groove, and then about a year of that agency, I left the agency with one of the other ladies who worked there, and we kind of started our own thing. And that led to a completely different kind of agency, which was my first digital agency, right when the internet was just beginning in the World Wide Web. And so in San Diego, we were one of the few agencies that even existed. We were building some of the first websites on the internet, and it was incredibly fascinating to be part of that whole awakening of internet technology. And I found myself very addicted to technology and that whole world. So I really have never left it since then. I ran that agency for about 12 years, and then sold off to my partners, spun out a new piece of software that we had built to try to run that and create our little .com millions. We were looking for the .com millions when the 2008 crash hit and destroyed our company, which led me out here to Chicago. And that's where I am now. I became a chief marketing officer. I decided that it was safer to go in-house, right? So I took corporate jobs, being chief marketing officer, heading up sales and marketing globally for a big agency here, and then a couple of different brands. And about 3 years ago, I just started feeling like I needed to have another I have another one in me. I got another startup. And one layoff later, here I am with Balladana, and we just launched last year, and it's a pretty exciting place to be.
All right, I think I'm last. I love hearing all these stories too, so I'm just as excited to be here listening as I am talking. So I was at Grady. I'm basically the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. So this whole social media thing was really kind of coming of age at the exact time that I was there. So we did not have social media classes because it wasn't a thing yet. But I was probably kind of like in the last group of people who didn't have that. And since I kind of grew up with social media, I didn't grow up with social media, but as I went through Grady, social media was also becoming a thing. I had to kind of learn it because, you know, I was in that group of college students who got like the initial, the Facebook invitation to join because I was in college at the time, right? So it was super cool. I do think that Grady grads of any age have this like driven nature all in common. And that was me too. So I ran the student-led PR agency we did called Creative Consultants. I don't know if that exists anymore, but that was so much fun, and really just enjoyed my time at Grady and was super involved as well. When I was there, we would have kind of career days where folks, especially from Atlanta, would come in and talk about all the opportunities available for us. A lot of times those were these paid internships, which was sort of this golden egg of the thing you wanted was a paid internship at a big agency in one of the big cities. And I was able to land one of those. You know, they had 2 spots, and it was in Atlanta. I was the only Grady grad, only UGA grad to get one of the spots that year in 2006. And so I felt very on top of the world, you know, kind of had a plan, kind of always had a plan, right? And I always knew the next step that I was supposed to take, and I would just set my sights on that step and do what I needed to do and get it done. And so I did get hired on at that agency, and it was such a good learning experience. And very similarly to a couple of my colleagues, I thought I would do that for a few years and learn a lot about a lot of different things and kind of get a good exposure. And then I would fall in love with one of the clients, and they would fall in love with me, and they would hire me, and I would make a ton of money and be very secure and safe in my job. That was my plan. And so in 2008, the economy started really dipping. By 2009, I was sort of that, you know, last person in, first person out. I was like a newlywed, and I was very, very upset about this when it happened because it was very unexpected to me. Today, I think that's something that I'm most thankful for happening in my career. So I was laid off, and I thought it was terrible. I didn't know what we were going to do. My husband was working part-time, still in school, in grad school. And so I just started Googling, and I just started figuring some stuff out about, I really wanted to get some freelance work rather than go on unemployment, because I was an idiot and thought that that was a bad thing to do, to go on unemployment. It's not. It's a great thing to do. But at the time, I did not know that. So I started really like working my network to try and figure out how to do some freelance work that could kind of help us pay bills and get from point A to point B. And in the meantime, we moved to Charlotte for my husband's job. And I didn't know anyone there, and I was working from our apartment. And so I joined the local social media group because it was free and I had no money. So I wanted to meet some people, and that was a topic that I could kind of talk about just because I was the young person at the agency who like had to figure out what Twitter was for everyone. And that ended up being a great opportunity to meet people, to kind of figure this out together with a group instead of figuring it all out by myself. But for a couple of years, I intentionally stayed in this kind of freelance consulting role. Someone's calling me, so I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me shut that down. So I bought a lot of books and met with a lot of people and figured out what it meant to really be my own boss and own my own business. Despite having not studied, entrepreneurship in college. I don't even know if that was offered, but we did study research. And I think all Grady grads had a really good research foundation. And so that's really the hat that I put on was, how do I figure this out? How do I write a business plan? And how do I do this? So I spent a good bit of time doing that, landed a few clients, did some of that work, and then ended up eventually through that social media group, meeting some folks, doing the networking, and I got a job in PR and promotions with a nonprofit in Charlotte. A few years later, I did decide to get a master's degree in communications also. I just couldn't get enough. So I went to Queen's University in Charlotte and did that. During that time, I decided to take on another role, kind of in economic development world with a group called Charlotte Center City Partners, where I went into this role of director of communications. I felt like I had sort of started in this PR box, but truly it was communications. It was thinking about the audience. It was all of the skills that I think all Grady grads have. So went into that director of communications role. And then a few years later, we moved to Greenville, where I found a company and kind of did that same role there. The company was called The Iron Yard, and it was in technology education. Then it happened again, you guys. That company was sold and closed. So happened again, and had to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up staying in that kind of industry and starting a nonprofit, and again, doing research and figuring out what all of that means. So that's where I sit today. And I took way too much time, so I apologize.
Not at all. It's so interesting to hear about all of the different things that I think life throws at us that we don't always plan for or can't plan for, and that we just have to adapt to it. And so, segueing into our next question, everyone on this panel has faced uncertainty, whether that's been, a recession or, COVID-19, layoffs and financial crises, and even just, changes in desire as to, your own goals and what you want to do. So the question is, can you tell us about the most uncertain time or an uncertain time in your career and how you moved forward through that?
I'll start. That's okay. And Whitney, I'll answer that question. I think we all kind of maybe touched on it in that. So I'm going to answer that question, and also just in the interest of time, because I really want to hear questions from anybody who's out there in the audience, but I also try to get into questions about the advice. But the hardest time for me, obviously, was for me. I only got laid off that one time, but I've been doing what I do in my profession for more than 30 years. And so for me, March 28, 2018 was like, full stop. Everything is going down the drain. But two thoughts overrode me at the first time. One is something I told young people all the time when I was running the internship program, Dallas One News. Things always work out, because they just do. They just always work out. You just got to ride the storm. It might be bumpy, but it'll work out. So I knew that going in, but the first thing I did was I took the first week to do nothing. I took I'm like, I've been going to work every day for like 30 something years. I'm going to do nothing for a while. Like really nothing. Not like vacation where you're going like, I'm on vacation. I got to go do this, because I got to go back to work. I'm like, I'm going to do nothing. So I did nothing. I didn't think about trying to get another job. I didn't think about this. I'm like, we're going to just do nothing for a week. And then after that, I started just looking around and, like I said, matching what I could do. I had some concerns because I was, obviously older and how things would work out, but I knew they would. And I think I just moved forward by, I networked with a few people, but I wasn't going to necessarily be influenced by a lot that I heard. I knew people haven't done this so long, but I still was going to try to figure out my own way. What I would say, and this is for me answering, like I said, question number 4, advice for anybody who's coming out now and things are really tough is you'll hear this a lot, but really be flexible. In my case, coming out of school, I was already married, still had the same wife, UGA grad. And so, we were starting off as a couple, so that's a little bit different. But if you, have the flexibility of time and being single and you can go work wherever you want to work or do what you want to do, try it right now. Now's the time to experiment because there's so much, and I think this word is overused, but I think it works here. There's so much disruption in society right now that you can latch on and do something, and maybe, what you majored in or studied in school, it might help you do something else that you feel like, really, I like this a whole lot more. So I would advise folks to do that. Don't panic. Be flexible. If you think you want to try something, try it for a while. If it doesn't work, do something else. If you're like 24, 23, 24 years old, you got time to figure out and do something else and just kind of make it. So that's kind of where I am on this.
I'll piggyback off that, Selwyn. Because I agree with you. Like, you got to say yes, and you got to network, and you have to just be open to change and open to what the universe hands you. Certainly, we're going through a lot of challenges right now. Anybody in retail and fashion is suffering pretty greatly, but I don't really know how this story ends because we're in the middle of it right now. But I can actually go back to the last recession. So I did a really radical, and I was older too when that hit, in 2008 hit, and I was completely maxed out. I had a mortgage that I was just about to lose my house. Everything in California was upside down, and we weren't getting our funding because none of the VCs were kicking out any money. And, my partners and I kind of looked at each other and said, at what point does this become stupid? And when do we give this up? Because it's really hard to give up a dream like that. We'd spent 5 years working on it. So it was the worst. It was literally the worst. And so I rented my house out from under me and did some soul searching. I read the 4-Hour Work Week. And actually, I didn't end up working a 4-hour work week like he did. There was a really interesting part of that. He asked you to go through an exercise where you really kind of go back to when you were a kid. What excited you? What did you love doing? And what are the things that are still left for you that you want to do? And I realized out of that the thing I wanted to do was, I didn't want to be agency side anymore, I said. I definitely didn't want to do that. But I wanted to learn about global marketing. I was so intrigued by the world and all the people out there and the cultures out there. And I felt like I wanted to understand more about the world around me and travel a lot more and just be part of a global conversation. And so I kind of put that out there in the universe and went and crashed at a friend's house for a few months and worked my network. And as it turned out, a woman I had been in a nonprofit with. So this is a good thing. Advice to people: join trade groups, because that is where you find people who can help you. Professional networking groups of any kind. And she had a job out in Chicago. And I said, look, I don't want to do agency work, and I definitely don't want to do search engine marketing anymore, because that's what I've been doing for the last 17 years. And she was like, well, I have a search engine marketing agency, but there's a global component of it. What do you think about coming on board in an innovation role? And I was like, all right. And I ended up loving it. So I just moved blind across the United States again, right, to Chicago. And I'd never lived above the Mason-Dixon line in my entire life, and found myself here. And it's been an incredible ride, because I got a soft landing. I got another chance. I had a chance to reinvent myself and look at my life in a whole way. And by the way, I got to run 18 global offices. How cool is that? And I learned so much, and I'm applying it now with the global network.
I love that. I will echo some of what Dana and Selwyn mentioned, which is that, the skills that I think we got starting at Grady can apply to every single industry, every single business. When I graduated, I don't think I really knew that to be true. I thought that, we each had our little titles, and we had to go get a job in that thing, whatever that one thing was. And that has totally blown up, especially I think in the general field of communication. But I think that is one of the things that I have learned as I've kind of faced a couple of different times of uncertainty. The hardest one for me to get over, to face and to get over, was that first layoff. So much of my identity was wrapped up in that path that I had taken from a young person up through going to UGA, going and getting into Grady, up to my first internship and my first job. It had been that very specific path. And so suddenly finding myself with, losing my footing, not having that path, having to figure it out, was really difficult for me. Now looking back, I realized how, lucky and privileged I was to even have been on such a clear path to get started, because so many people are not. But what I would tell myself if I were kind of facing that again is, just like Selwyn said, like, please don't worry. Things will work out. And that is so much easier said than experienced. We were, I'm very transparent about everything. So we were, two people living on less than $20,000 of income in a year in Atlanta, and trying to figure that out. But as Dana said, you can figure it out. You can move. You can stay with a friend. You can figure out how to get from point A to point B. So that was a really important lesson for me, I think, to go through, and not for me to just read about or, hear about, but for me to go through, because now, having been through it again, and then of course in our current, super uncertain COVID pandemic life, I do not have that same sense of fear, because I know that that it will be okay. A job is a job, and there are many of them, and it's very important to network, keep connecting with folks, keep your skills up, keep learning new things, keep staying open. But I don't think I would have that sense of having less fear if I hadn't faced it already, if I hadn't been through it a couple of times. So again, I know it's a lot easier said than experienced, but yeah.
So the most uncertain time in my career was in that early phase when I was at the Associated Press, and I just knew I was getting a full-time job. And then the temp position ended after a year, and I'm just kind of floating in Nashville. So I made it through that time by freelancing, and I was able to keep working for the AP. But I also took on projects for people that I just met in Nashville who needed like ghostwriters or people to help with their social media. And the easy advice that I can give you is to network. So you've heard that. Keep in touch with your professors and your mentors, because when I let them know that my position at the AP was ending, they easily filtered me to their contacts, and I was able to get several job offers within 3 weeks. So that's the easy advice. Like, keep in touch with people. Keeping in touch with someone is not a LinkedIn connection. Like, keeping in touch with someone means like sending them emails, calling them on the phone. I usually send postcards to people because it's like really unexpected. Like, oh, you went to the beach. Like, it's just something that they'll remember the next time that I call them and ask for help. The unique advice that I'll give you is that you probably have a hobby, and you can leverage that hobby to make money, even if it's not your full-time job. Some people call this hustling. So I mentioned that I got my MBA and studied entrepreneurship. That wasn't because I wanted to be a communications director. That was because I really thought I was going to open my own bakery. So for a while, I was moonlighting, like making wedding cakes and cookies, like all the TV shows that you watch on the Food Network and Cooking Channel. Like, that was me, working out of my kitchen, easily making like $500 in one weekend because I, just threw some fondant on a cake and someone liked the way it tasted. And then for a while I was doing like calligraphy. So when people were having special events or wedding invitations, like $2 an envelope, I could just bang those out. So in addition to like the skills that you've learned at Grady, you probably have something that interests you that in a way you can still make money from it. And maybe that's not the money that you use to like pay your mortgage, but maybe that's the money you use to like get your nails done or to go on vacation with your friends or whatever else. So just like think outside the box.
And can I add to that? Because Juanita, that is such a great point. When the Iron Yard was closing, I found out this business I was part of was closing. I had learned a little bit on the job about SEO. I dove into that with free resources that I could teach myself online. And SEO is hard, like it's not an easy thing. A lot of people don't know how to do it. I just taught it to myself and quickly got clients and easily made $20,000 on the side in a year, so that is totally doable with so many good resources online that are often free for us to use. And again, that research skill that we all have. So I love that advice. That's awesome.
Thank you. We've had a couple questions come in, so I'll add on to one of those. One of them is related to the networking topic that we're on. But this person has asked, without face-to-face networking opportunities right now, what advice do you have for getting plugged in? And I know one of you mentioned the postcards, which I think is a great idea. Are there other strategies that any of you would share?
So I get, I would say probably at least twice a month, I get emails from people I do not know who just see that I'm on the board for the Public Relations Society of America Nashville chapter. And they say like, hey, can we talk? So usually that would be like a coffee or a lunch. Now it's just turned into Zoom sessions. Like I feel like I'm always on Zoom, which everyone probably feels like that. But really, like you can cold call someone that you just like found them on LinkedIn, or you found them online and you think they're interesting. You want to pick their brain. Like I've never been turned down from extending an invitation like that myself. And I don't turn down those invitations because I know that I've benefited from the advice and the relationships of so many other people. So like, yeah, just do a Zoom call or FaceTime or like the old school phone where you just dial 10 digits.
I will echo that. I have two things that I do. One, similar to you're talking about, like being part of a group. There's all sorts of like meetups and things like that where you can meet people. And I joined a local, it's the International Board of Apparel here, and they started putting on monthly breakfasts. We do Zoom breakfasts. So we just get together and kind of talk about the industry, and it's deepening these relationships with people that I've never even met. And so I'm getting to know who they are, and we're spending time together on Zoom. Not as great as coffee, but it's definitely a start. Anything you can get that's regular to be part of that has an expansion opportunity. I would also say I consider myself an excellent LinkedIn stalker. I am really good at LinkedIn stalking because usually I don't reach out to somebody unless I have a very specific ask. So especially if they're in a higher ranking function, which normally I'm reaching out to other CEOs. So I will talk to them about a research paper that I'm doing that I want them to be part of, or it's something specific. Hey, I have a tangible ask for you. Could you help me with this? And I just need 15 minutes. And I've almost never been turned down as long as I'm very, very specific and give them the opportunity to, hand me off if they need to somebody else, but it gets me that starting point.
Thank you. There are two other questions that are kind of similar, so I'm going to go ahead and combine them. But it's looking at, over the past few months, how have your current roles and companies been affected by COVID-19, if you can share? And, how have those things made you even more strong or resilient, or are there lessons that you learned as a professional or in your personal life?
I'll start there. For me, I haven't been in our office is actually the global headquarters for our firm. I haven't been in the office since March 10th, I think. All work from home, everything's from home. I'm home now. And although I thought I could do it, and I think people in the company thought that we could be successful, doing it. We have managed to be successful, have managed to stay with clients, have managed to get the work done working from home. That's a big change that is becoming, I think, by the day, more permanent for us. You know, the company now is, you know, purchasing office furniture for those who need it, things you need to make your home office, you know, and I think that's becoming a trend that's going around. You know, my bosses asked me about, you know, about my thoughts about going back to the office. I'm like, I never have to go back. And this is great. As long as they can reach me. And a lot of people work, you know, on my team worked in different cities anyway. So I was on the phone with them even when I was actually in the office. So I think that's a big change. And I guess you learn that you can, you know, you just deal with things that maybe a year ago even people wouldn't have thought, oh, you got to be there, you got to have this meeting, it's got to be face to face. You realize you can make it work and work very, very well. You have to pay, you know, more attention. You get more distracted when you aren't in the office. For me, I found I've been actually less. That's.
I'll jump into, so I currently am executive director of a small nonprofit. And so with COVID-19 happening, we run 2 programs, but one of those programs is in person. And we were supposed to have a class start in April and ended up having to make the decision to postpone that, which did affect our bottom line. And so as the person in the leadership role here, I had to go figure out PPP funding, EIDL funding, all of the alphabet soup options here. I had to follow the news about from the federal level, how they were dealing with kind of the relief packages. How did that impact nonprofits specifically? Really, as Dana mentioned, just the importance of kind of relying on the groups that I'm a part of. So I made sure that I was keeping up with our local and state nonprofit groups and my board, you know, of course. But yeah, so just like I had to learn how to do, you know, taxes as an entrepreneur years ago, I had to kind of jump in and figure out how to do all of this stuff to essentially make sure our business is solvent for the long term. Luckily, all those things, we were able to get it done. Certainly, I didn't figure it out alone. I had a lot of help. And to Juanita's point, a lot of that was me picking up the phone and figuring it out and asking people. So it's kind of old school advice, but still works.
We've been really hit hard because we have 2 areas of impact. One is impact in demand. People aren't getting married. People aren't going to fancy parties. People aren't getting new promotions where they have to wear nice suits and work clothes. Everybody's just sitting around in their pajamas. So it's the demand side is definitely diminished. On the supply side, we've had some severe impacts to shipping and supply chain. People trying to get fabrics, things are just, they're not working out there right now. So we're in a bit of a just sort of a suppression is what I'll say to the business that was starting to grow and hitting some nice metrics. So what I did, and when I realized that in, I guess, April, May, I'm like, this is not going away. I think I just need to hunker down here. And so I went and looked at all the stuff that I had been putting off. In business, there's this concept of being in your business and working on your business. So I had been working in my business quite a bit, day-to-day, little details, customers this and this, that, and the other. So working on your business means stepping back, looking at the fundamentals, you know, looking at that business plan that you haven't touched in a year and saying, all right, what were the assumptions that we made and is it still accurate? And bringing in a bunch of interns. I lucked out, got a ton of interns, and they brought such new life to us. We got a chance to do a lot of the heavy lifting that we'd been putting off for quite some time for business planning, and that white paper that's sitting still out there. It was really great to just like finally like, okay, well now I've got time. Let's go back and look at these fundamentals again. And let's also see if there's a way for us to pivot and be able to capture what's happening out there. So one of the things that is happening is people are terrified to go into stores, also dressing rooms, right? So there had been on our back burner forever and ever a project of working better with these 3D scanning apps, things where you go into a room, you scan, or you do it on your phone at home, to be able to just shoot your measurements into a system and output custom-made clothes on the other end. And we hadn't made it a priority. So now, since we had some interns available on a program, I was like, well, let's just do that. And as it's turning out, it's one of the best things that we could have done, because now every indicator is looking like there's going to be some incredible growth in this area for us. So being able to have this agile supply chain, I mean, I literally have different countries I can tap into. So if China goes down, I've got 9 other countries that I can work with. So it, in the long run, will be a blessing. It's hard right now. It is. There are days that I have to allow myself to have low energy days, where you just go, yeah, today's just going to be one of those crap days where you don't get anything done. Because it's COVID. Yay.
So the past 6 months or so have been very difficult for me because we're at a K-12 school. We have about 1,100 students. So we decided to go to spring break early. And when we came back from spring break, we never went back to school. So we did remote learning through the end of the school year, and then wound up doing virtual summer camps also. And now are gearing up for what we're calling a gradual start, which is we're planning to bring only a few grade levels to campus at a time. So usually in the summer, I work year round as a school administrator. So usually in the summer, I get to take a lot of vacation, and then I work on special projects like the magazine, or I do a lot of introspective work and fine-tune projects for next year. But this summer, I've spent almost all of my time like writing our back to school plan, our reopening document, updating websites. In the midst of all of the COVID pandemic crisis, to a social media crisis shortly after George Floyd was murdered. We had postponed our fundraiser for the school. That was usually in March. We postponed it to June, and have been sending emails and letting people know that it was coming up, and then posted on social media maybe a day or two after Blackout Tuesday about the school fundraiser, and it was ill received. So you may have seen like a lot of people have at so-and-so accounts. Fortunately, we sidestepped that, but our alumni and our high school students really came down on us hard about our diversity and equity and inclusion efforts, and have sent several petitions to the school. So it's between all of our diversity work and making up to alumni and COVID, like I haven't done any like work, and that's difficult because I'm a box checker. So I feel like I have this enormous to-do list that's on my perpetual calendar that just isn't being done. And I think that at some point you just have to step back and think about the now, instead of like all the things that you should be doing. Like what is the most important thing that I need to get done now? And your supervisor will most likely be understanding, and mine has been in this case. So like no one's looking for the magazine.
Thank you. I think all of the things that you're saying are things that I identify with as well. I think we're all going through this together, which in some ways is a comforting experience, I think. But I really love the idea of using this time to take some perspective and taking a step back that a few of you have mentioned. And I think that's something valuable for our students too, is, since we have this time to, pause or shift, taking that time to reflect is really important. And thank you for sharing all of that. I think we have time for one more question. And this one kind of goes to thinking about sort of the new situation we're in with being on Zoom all the time. So this says, with all the Zooming, do you have tips for online interviewing and online meetings for students and young professionals?
Yes. treat the Zoom interview as you would an in-person interview. So if you're going to dress up for an in-person interview, dress up there. Make sure your hair is combed or brushed or whatever. I mean, you want to cut down all distractions. Put your cell phone on silent and don't check it during the interview. Keep great eye contact with the person that you're interviewing, and don't be looking around. Go in a place that's quiet so that you can really focus and interview. Do some homework or some research on the place that you're interviewing with or the person that you're interviewing with so that you can respond to it. You want to treat the Zoom interview just as if you're sitting down there in person, because they're hiring a person, and so I think that's very I think it's very important that you do that. And I know, before I wrap that up, I just want to say on this one other question out there about a mentor. I think UGA has a mentor program that Diane Murray runs it very well. If you haven't connected to that, whoever that person is that asked that question, please do. I think there are lots of people, particularly if they came to Grady, that would be willing to be mentors.
I would also add to that, Selwyn, because I always look for things, especially if I'm hiring for like marketing or generally, and send samples and send physical things wherever possible. Well, not physical, digital, right? Like, have them, before you even get on the Zoom, have them understanding who you are and the type of work that you can produce. Because the biggest risk when you're hiring an intern is that they're going to take more out of you than you're going to give back to them, right? Or an intern or fresh grads, like somebody who's entry level. So you have to prove to them that you're going to hit the ground day one, and you're going to be able to start producing the stuff that's going to matter. So do your best work, and frankly, even offer to, I know this is controversial, because like we always give a little test to people before they hire them, because sometimes I've had people give me great portfolios and do terrible work. So, I always do, I put a little bar up there. But if you really want to prove to somebody, say, hey, I'll take on this, you have a little problem that I can solve for you. And yeah, Zoom is just the conduit. I mean, we're going to spend a lot of time in our digital lives, regardless of COVID, talking on computers and phones to each other in a digital format. So the faster you get comfortable with that and work around it in terms of being able to be warm on screen, right? Engage people. Don't look over there. Do not look at your phone. Whatever you do, put that thing way over there. And be able to show delivery, like show what you can do. It's all about the work. It's really all about the work.
Go ahead, Juanita.
Okay, thank you. So I'll add that when you're doing your research on the company, they most likely have on their website like guiding principles or mission statement or like their values. Really study that language that they're using, and then in the interview, like regurgitate it. And I mean, use your own words, be authentic, but make it clear that you understand the company and what they stand for and what their mission is. That will really earn you brownie points if you can use like some of the same lingo that the company is using. And then also, I just hired for a new position in my department. I had 140 applications. If someone did not follow directions, I automatically like set them off to the side. So we also do like tests. So I had them, in addition to their writing samples, I had them write an essay on a prompt that I gave them. And I said, please submit this as a Word document or a Google Doc. And all the people who submitted PDFs, like I still read them so I could like take their ideas, but I never gave them a chance to interview because they didn't follow directions. So no matter like how simple or mundane or useless that you think that request is, like there's a reason why they asked for it that way. And my reason was because I wanted to redact all their names so I didn't have like a bias as I was reading their critiques of our social media. So just follow directions and then like read their website and use the same language.
I love that. I was interviewing 2 people just this morning. All of the advice that has been given so far is perfect. Of course, do your research, make sure you don't have the distractions, make sure your internet is reliable, try to make sure your dog is not going to bark and all that good stuff. And then Juanita's point about following directions, same thing. I had a lot of people apply for a position. Many of them were overqualified, amazing people, but if they didn't do exactly what I was asking in the instructions, it's basic, right? But if they didn't do it, then at least it showed me that they didn't care enough to follow directions, which speaks volumes. The only other thing I would add, and I think Dana actually mentioned this earlier when talking about that idea of kind of reaching out, networking, maybe even to the question about mentorship, is to be specific if possible. Like, I'm way more likely to answer someone's question if they have something that's really specific to something that I've experienced or a place I've worked or a person I know, rather than just a, hey, can I pick your brain generally about life and career work and whatever. That just, if you're looking for a person who can be a mentor to you, there's not going to be some like magical fairy godmother type of person to sit with you and teach you all the things you need to have the perfect career. But there might be a person who works at your dream company that would be more than willing to talk to you about how, to get an internship there in this particular arm of the business or whatever. So try to be as specific and and give as much of that kind of context as you can, either in the interview process or when reaching out about mentorship.
All right. Well, we're just about at time, so I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. We do have one question left in the Q&A, but I can get answers from our panelists offline, and then go ahead and send that around to students, talking a little bit more about making some of those networking connections. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so wonderful to hear your stories and advice, and I know that our students really appreciate hearing from alumni and people who are actually out there doing the work. So thank you so much for joining us. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us here. Good luck to all y'all out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Yes, thank you guys. Good luck.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.